2004 was the first season of NASCAR's new points format that included the chase for the NEXTEL Cup. Basically what this meant was after 26 races, they were going to draw a line. Top 10 in points, or anybody within 400 points of the leader, would be in the chase and would be reset to a new points total where they would compete against each other for the remaining 10 races. The first of those drivers was points leader Jeff Gordon, who led the series in both wins and top 10s. His 5 wins came at Talladega, Fontana, Sonoma, the Summer Daytona race, and the Brickyard 400. He was looking for his 5th NEXTEL Cup championship. Close behind him was Jimmy Johnson, the 48, who was second in points. He had 4 wins coming at Darlington, the Coke 600, and sweeping both Pocono races. He had 15 top 5s and 16 top 10s, so he was either in the top 5 or wasn't there at all. He was looking for his first NASCAR championship. Third in points was most popular driver Dale Earnhardt Jr., who was having a career season with 4 wins that included his first Daytona 500, a win at Atlanta, Richmond, and the Bristol night race. He had 12 top 5s to go with 15 top 10s, looking for his first championship. Fourth in points with 2 wins was 2-time champion Tony Stewart, his wins coming at Chicagoland and Watkins Glen. He had 9 top 5s and 13 top 10s in the regular season. Fifth in points was Matt Kenseth, who had 2 wins on the season that came in back-to-back weeks, and it was races 2 and 3 of the season. The first win was the final NASCAR Cup Series race held at Rockingham, and then he won the next weekend at Las Vegas to go ahead with his 15 top 10s. He was the defending series champion, winning his first title in 2003. Another guy having a breakout season was the driver 6th in points, Elliott Sadler. He had 2 wins, narrowly beating Casey Kane at Texas and then winning the summer nighttime race at Fontana to go along with 7 top 5s and 11 top 10s. He was looking for his first title. 7th in points was the 97 of Kurt Busch. He had 2 wins to go along with 4 top 5s, but 12 top 10s and was running up front a lot going into the chase, winning the first Bristol race and the first New Hampshire race. 8th in points was grizzled veteran Mark Martin, still looking for his first title. He won once earlier in the season at Dover to go along with 12 top 10s. He was going to be a contender even in his old age. After an 8-win season in 2003 that saw him ultimately lose the championship to Matt Kenseth, Ryan Newman made the inaugural chase for the NEXTEL Cup as the 9th in points driver. He had 1 win at the first Michigan race to go with 8 top 5s and 11 top 10s. He was the definition of checkers or wreckers. And last but not least, the 10th driver was the initial win and you're in driver, Jeremy Mayfield, with his 1 win coming the previous week at Richmond. Going into the race, he was actually 14th in points, but in the old point system, you could score up to 190 points in a race if you led the most laps and won the race, so there was quite a few drivers who were fighting for the last playoff position. With Mayfield's win, he knocked out his teammate, rookie Casey Kane, from the 10-driver chase. We always talk about win and you're in, but there were 2 drivers who had won in 2004 that missed the chase. Rusty Wallace won the first Martinsville race, and Greg Biffle won the second race at Michigan. So heading into New Hampshire, the drivers were separated by 5 points apiece based on seeding. Jeff Gordon at the top at 50-50, and Jeremy Mayfield at the bottom at 50-05. For the first race of the chase, we started at New Hampshire. Qualifying was rained out before the first round of the chase, so they started by points, which meant all 10 of the chase drivers started themselves in the top 10, with Jeff Gordon on the pole. A caution came out just 18 laps into this one as Robbie Gordon and Greg Biffle tangled. You might be wondering why I'm mentioning this since none of the chase drivers are in this, but it's Robbie Gordon. You know there's going to be something else. About 50 laps later, Robbie Gordon took payback on Greg Biffle, and chasers Jeremy Mayfield and Tony Stewart were both caught up. Stewart had led 16 laps earlier in the race. With just under 40 laps to go while running second, chaser Ryan Newman blew his engine while battling Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Kurt Busch for the lead of the race. This would be a huge loss of points to start the chase. Ultimately, it would be Kurt Busch completing the New Hampshire sweep and winning the first race of the chase, leading 155 laps to have a max points day of 190. Matt Kenseth and Dale Earnhardt Jr. joined him in the top 5, whereas Gordon and Sadler both got top 10s. Johnson ran 11th, Mark Martin in 13th, and then Newman, Mayfield, and Stewart all having troubles finishing in the 30s. This allowed Busch to jump from 7th in points to tie Dale Earnhardt Jr. for the lead after the first round. Gordon dropped 2 spots but was only 9 points behind. Jimmy Johnson lost 30 points and was down 3 positions. Mark Martin gained 1 spot as Tony Stewart dropped 4, going 124 points behind the leader. The second race of the chase took place at Dover, and it was the driver who was 10th in points, Jeremy Mayfield, who sat on the pole for this one. Newman was in second, Sadler also starting in the top 5 and 4th, Kenseth and Johnson in the top 10, Mark Martin, Kurt Busch for Roush just outside of the top 10, Jr., Gordon, and Stewart all outside of the top 15. We were 121 laps into this one before any chasers had anything happen, and it was Matt Kenseth who lost control while trying to enter the pits, and he ended up hitting the tire barrier, destroying his car. He had led 58 laps earlier in the race. Jumping to just under 30 laps to go, we had a driver inside the top 10, Elliott Sadler, who pit for a flat right rear tire. This killed his chances and it took him off the lead lap. At the end of the day though, nobody had anything for Ryan Newman as he led 325 of 400 laps in a dominating victory at Dover. Mark Martin was runner-up in second, Jeff Gordon and Kurt Busch both getting inside the top 5, Tony Stewart, Jeremy Mayfield, Earnhardt Jr. and Johnson all getting top 10s, and then the aforementioned Sadler and Kenseth fell outside of the top 20. After his third place finish, Jeff Gordon retook the points lead, taking it by 1 over Kurt Busch. Jr. lost a position and fell to 3rd, but he was only 18 points back. Johnson jumped to 4th, Mark Martin jumped to 5th, while Matt Kenseth dropped to 7th in points. Newman and Stewart flipped around from 8th and 9th, but Jeremy Mayfield stayed in dead last in 10th position. The third race of the chase was the one that everyone had circled, Talladega. It was really important to get through here having a clean day. I know qualifying doesn't matter as much on a plate track. Jeff Gordon was the only one inside of the top 5. Sadler, Kenseth, Busch, Mayfield, and Earnhardt Jr. were all inside the top 10. Johnson, Martin, and Newman inside the top 20, and Stewart started in 30th. It was a very clean Talladega race, and we didn't have our first issue with a chaser until lap 144, when Jeremy Mayfield was caught up in the medium one, getting collected by Jeff Green, Bobby Hamilton Jr., and Jimmy Spencer. On lap 157, under Green while solidly within the pack, Jimmy Johnson pitted with an engine issue. This took him out of the race. At the end of this one though, it was Dale Earnhardt Jr. winning his 5th race at Talladega and his 5th race of the 2004 season. Kurt Busch was also in the top 5. Tony Stewart grabbed a top 10. Kenseth, Martin, Newman, and Gordon were all within the top 20, and Elliott Sadler finished in 22nd, upside down for the 2nd year in a row, flipping at Talladega. Johnson and Mayfield both finished towards the back of the pack in 37th and 38th respectively. Following this one, Junior Nation was buzzing as he took over the points lead with a 13-point margin on Kurt Busch and up 61 points on Jeff Gordon. But not so fast. If you're a Junior fan, you know what happens here. In the now famous Victory Lane interview with Matt Yoakum, Dale Earnhardt Jr. said a swear on TV, and everyone was really strict on this because of the whole Super Bowl thing that happened earlier that year, so Jr. was docked 25 points for swearing on live TV. With that penalty, Kurt Busch was able to hold on to the points lead. He was 12 points up on Dale Earnhardt Jr. and about 50 up on Jeff Gordon, who dropped 2 positions. Martin, Kenseth, Stewart, and Newman all gained, while Sadler and Johnson dropped in points. Mayfield held steady in 10th position. The 4th race of the chase was finally going to bring us to a more traditional 1.5 miles at Kansas. Jeremy Mayfield led the chasers once again with a 3rd place qualifying position. Johnson was 1 spot behind him as the only other driver inside the top 5. Newman and Jr. were both inside the top 10, whereas Sadler was 1 position shy in 11th. The 3 Roush cars were 15th, 18th, and 22nd, Stewart in 24th, and Gordon in 30th position after a disastrous qualifying run. On lap 154, Kurt Busch lost the rear of the car shortly after a restart and spun out in front of the whole field that was bunched together. Through the smoke, Jimmie Johnson joined in and they did some synchronized spinning on the back straightaway. Neither driver took any damage from the wall or for other cars and were both good to continue. Towards the end of the race on lap 209, Ryan Newman, while running inside the top 5 and 4th, hit the wall coming out of turn 4 and went for a spin through the infield grass. He went to the garage and was done for the day. On the following restart, Jimmie Johnson lost it coming out of turn 2 and smoked the wall, destroying the front end and also going to the garage. He was running in 16th place at the time of the accident. But when the checkered flag flew on lap 267, it was not a chase driver in the lead, as Joe Nemechek would win his final NASCAR Cup Series race, being the first non-chase driver to win a chase race. That's a good piece of trivia for you right there. Sadler led the chase drivers with a 4th place run. Jeremy Mayfield was 1 spot behind him and the only other driver inside the top 5. Kurt Busch with a solid 6th place, recovering after his spin. Earnhardt Jr. got himself in the top 10 and 9th. Gordon and Stewart were 13th and 14th. A couple Roush cars were inside the top 20 with Matt Kenseth and Mark Martin. Johnson and Newman finished 32nd and 33rd after their troubles. The top 3 in points held firm. Kurt Busch did extend his points lead a little bit, but it was Elliott Sadler as the big mover, as he jumped 4 positions up to 4th in points after a solid top 5 run. Mark Martin, Matt Kenseth, and Ryan Newman all dropped a spot in points because of the troubles, and Jimmie Johnson was down deep in 9th after 4 races. The 5th race of the chase would bring us to Lowe's Motor Speedway, which is more well known as Charlotte Motor Speedway. Ryan Newman sat on the pole for this one. Elliott Sadler was in the top 5. Jimmie Johnson the only other driver inside the top 10. A few guys in the teens, Martin, Mayfield, and Stewart. Kurt Busch, Jeff Gordon, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. in the 20s, and Matt Kenseth starting shotgun on the field in 36th. And it didn't take early for some chasers to get in trouble here, as on lap 1, Kurt Busch spun out and took some right front damage. Jeff Gordon got collected in it and took some rear damage to his car. On lap 77, while Gordon was a lap down in 30th, he got into some trouble with a top 5 car in Rusty Wallace and took massive damage to the rear of his car and looked like he was going to be in some pretty serious trouble. About 100 laps later, while running in 9th, Matt Kenseth hit the wall, pancaking the right side of his car and pretty much ending his chance at having a solid run. On lap 224, Kevin Harvick, who was 1 lap down, started leaking oil on the track. Mayfield got into it and smoked the wall, virtually ending his day, and Matt Kenseth, who was also a lap down, ended up spinning in this. Jeff Gordon had gotten his lap back on the previous caution, and this one allowed him to get back on sequence with the leaders. With under 25 laps to go, Mark Martin, who was running in 3rd place and battling Ryan Newman for 2nd, took a ton of damage to the left front and the right side of his car after hitting the wall when 2 lappers in front of him got into some trouble and he had nowhere to go. At the end of the race, it was the Lowe's car winning at Lowe's Motor Speedway, as Jimmie Johnson won in the 48 car. Gordon was runner-up in 2nd after a great recovery drive. Earnhardt Jr. also getting a top 5, finishing in 3rd. Kurt Busch in 4th, Elliott Sadler and Tony Stewart in 10th for the top 10 drivers. A couple Roush cars in Matt Kenseth and Mark Martin finished in 11th and 13th. Ryan Newman finished in 14th, and Jeremy Mayfield down in 30th. Pretty much everybody held their positions in points here. Only movement was Jimmie Johnson taking over 8th from Ryan Newman, who dropped himself to 9th. Past the halfway point, and the 6th round of the chase would bring us back to a short track at Martinsville. Ryan Newman would start on the pole for the 2nd week in a row. Dale Earnhardt Jr. joined him in the top 5 in 3rd position. Kurt Busch, the only other driver in the top 10, he was starting in 7th. Mayfield, Stewart, Gordon, and Johnson all inside the top 20. Mark Martin was in 23rd and his Roush teammate Matt Kenseth in 25th. Elliott Sadler rolled off last of the chasers in 33rd position. This was a pretty slow one until lap 406, when Dale Earnhardt Jr. pitted under green, complaining about his rear brakes. He had front end damage from an earlier running in with Carl Edwards, but was still in pretty decent shape. The team looked at it, and right as he merged back onto the track, he collected Dale Jarrett, who was running in 37th place almost 100 laps down, and brought out a yellow, and this was the start of Junior's problems. Shortly after they went back green on lap 417, the drive shaft came off of his car on the track, and he had to go into the garage for some repairs. A little bit later, with just under 50 laps to go, Elliott Sadler, while running in 21st position, spun himself out and brought out the yellow. Junior ended up coming back onto the track after some repairs, and 25th place Kyle Petty spun out in front of him, and Junior had nowhere to go, clobbering him while already 17 laps down in 33rd position. And the hits kept coming for these guys as on the restart, Joe Nemechek spun out, and the 38 car of Elliott Sadler, who was already damaged in 26th, had nowhere to go and ran into him. Jimmie Johnson would go 2 in a row, winning at Martinsville, Ryan Newman and Kurt Busch both joining him in the top 5. Jeremy Mayfield with a solid run in 6th, and Jeff Gordon, the only other driver in the top 10, finishing in 9th. Martin, Stewart, and Kenseth all finished in the teens, whereas Sadler and Junior finished 32nd and 33rd after all their troubles. This was a bittersweet win for Hendrick, though, because on the way to the race, a Hendrick Motorsports plane crashed, killing 10 family and friends. All 4 Hendrick drivers would run this image on their hoods the next weekend. With this win, Johnson kind of snuck himself back into the conversation, moving up from 8th to 4th in points. Junior lost a spot to Jeff Gordon, but Elliott Sadler dropped 3 positions in points after his disastrous day. Kurt Busch had an almost 100-point lead on second place Jeff Gordon after 6 races. The 7th race of the chase would bring us back onto a mile and a half, this time at Atlanta. For the 3rd week in a row, it was Ryan Newman on the pole. Elliott Sadler was in the top 5 and 3rd. Junior, Martin, Johnson, and Gordon all inside the top 10. Mayfield just outside the top 10 in 11th. Tony Stewart in 15th. Kurt Busch in 22nd, and Matt Kenseth in the back in 39th position. We were 55 laps into this one when a huge opportunity showed up for everybody. Points leader Kurt Busch finally had trouble blowing an engine early into this one, meaning the championship race was wide open for the taking. Sadler was the next chaser to run into trouble, as on lap 119 while running in 5th, he lost his transmission during a pit stop and had to go into the garage. About halfway through the race, Kurt Busch's Roush Racing teammate Matt Kenseth blew an engine while running in 6th. During the pit stop, 2nd in points, Jeff Gordon went to the garage with the same transmission issue that Elliott Sadler had. With just under 15 laps to go, Dale Earnhardt Jr., who was 3rd in points and the top 2 drivers, Kurt Busch and Jeff Gordon, are already out of the race, had a huge chance to make up points, but he got into a wreck with Carl Edwards while battling Jimmie Johnson and Mark Martin for the lead of the race. No one wanted the points lead at Atlanta. Jimmie Johnson would win, putting Hendrick Motorsports on his back after an emotional week for 3 wins in a row. Mark Martin was runner-up in 2nd. Tony Stewart was the only other driver inside the top 10, finishing in 9th. Newman, with a mediocre 17th, was 4th of the chasers, and Jeremy Mayfield, even worse, in the top 5 at 26th. Junior, Gordon, Sadler, Kenseth, and Busch all finished outside of the top 30, running into their own issues during the day. Some way, somehow, after just being 9th in points, Jimmie Johnson had worked his way all the way up to 2nd, only 59 points behind points leader Kurt Busch. Gordon lost a spot and dropped down to 3rd, where Junior lost 2 spots, dropping himself to 5th, but he was still within 100 points of Kurt Busch. Despite the pretty mediocre day, Newman jumped from 9th to 7th in points, taking a spot away from Sadler and Matt Kenseth. We were heading back to a short track the next weekend for race 8 at Phoenix. And Ryan Newman got his 4th pole in a row as the only chaser inside the top 5. Stewart, Gordon, and Sadler all inside the top 10, Johnson in 13th and Junior in 14th. Kenseth, the only other driver, inside the top 20 with 16th. Martin, Mayfield, and Kurt Busch all starting inside the 20s. On lap 129, there were a bunch of guys who spun out on the front straightaway, including Jamie McMurray, Kevin Harvick, and 2 chasers in Kurt Busch and Mark Martin. Neither of the chasers took much damage and were good to continue. About 25 laps later, while battling for 12th, Elliott Sadler cut a right front tire, racing, yeah, you guessed it, Robbie Gordon. Ryan Newman, who had lost a lap earlier in the race, got the free pass on this caution. A little bit later on, with under 40 laps to go in the race, 14th place Matt Kenseth blew an engine for the second week in a row. But as the checkered flag flew, it was Dale Earnhardt Jr. winning his second race of the chase, holding off Ryan Newman, who had a late race charge. Jeff Gordon also finished in the top 5 and 3rd, Johnson, Stewart, and Busch all grabbing top 10s. Mark Martin with a top 15, Mayfield in 21st, and then Kenseth and Sadler both finishing deep in the 30s. This win moved Dale Jr. from 5th back to 3rd in the points, only 47 points behind points leader Kurt Busch. Gordon was in 2nd, 6 points ahead of him, and Johnson was 1 point behind him, 48 back for the 48 car. Mark Martin also lost a spot in the points because of Jr. winning. He was 102 points back of his teammate Kurt Busch. 6 through 10 all held pat, with Jeremy Mayfield stuck in 10th position like he had been for the whole chase. The next weekend, for the penultimate race of the season, we were headed to Darlington. Does anybody remember Darlington being this late? This completely caught me off guard when I was researching for this video. Unfortunately, Ryan Newman did not have a chance to go for 5 poles in a row because qualifying was canceled due to rain, and they lined up based on points, giving all the chasers the top spots in the field. Somehow, Darlington was a much more civil race than Phoenix for the chasers, with no issues coming into lap 330 when 5th place Ryan Newman blew a motor. A few drivers had gotten a Darlington stripe throughout the race, but everyone was still running on the track in good health. Jimmy Johnson would get his 4th win in 5 races, winning at Darlington, and Mark Martin got another runner-up finish in 2nd. Gordon consistent with another top 5 and 3rd, and Kurt Busch in 6th place once again. These were the only 4 chasers inside of the top 10. Junior finished in 11th position, Stewart was in 17th 1 lap down, Mayfield, Kenseth, and Sadler were all 2 laps down, and then of course Ryan Newman down in 34th after blowing his motor. With this win, the charge for Jimmy Johnson continued, as he was now only 18 points behind Kurt Busch for the championship lead going into the final race. Gordon was 21 points behind, Earnhardt Jr. 72 behind, and Mark Martin 82 behind. Mark Martin, Tony Stewart, and Ryan Newman all held their points positions. Matt Kenseth jumped a spot on Elliott Sadler for 8th, and Mayfield held 10th. The final race of the chase was of course going to end at Homestead-Miami Speedway. And there were 5 drivers who were championship eligible going into the final race: Mark Martin, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Hendrick teammates Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson, and of course points leader Kurt Busch. Mark Martin and Dale Earnhardt Jr. both needed a little bit of luck to have a chance, but the Hendrick cars could win if they outran Busch by a few positions. Kurt Busch delivered under the pressure and qualified on the pole. Newman qualified in 3rd, and Jeff Gordon the only other chaser inside of the top 5. The fringe hopefuls of Mark Martin and Dale Earnhardt Jr. qualified 11th and 16th, whereas Jimmy Johnson started deep in 39th position. On lap 94, while running in 2nd position, Kurt Busch thought he had a flat tire, and while he was pitting under green, his tire just barely fell off and rolled onto the front straightaway, causing a caution. He really had a golden horseshoe this season. Shortly after the restart for the Kurt Busch caution, Jeremy Mayfield, running in 25th position, smoked the wall, solidifying his 10th place chase finish. About 40 laps later, 16th place Elliott Sadler spun out by himself coming off of turn 4, slapping the wall with the left side and taking a ton of damage. On the following restart, Casey Kane in the number 9 car, who was multiple laps down, spun out, and Travis Kvapil, who was running the Penske 06 car in 17th position, was hit by Dale Jr. while they were slowing down. Jr. took some front-end damage. But nothing stung more than Ryan Newman, who with just 2 laps to go before the green-white checkered laps were added, blew a right front tire and smoked the wall while leading the race and had it pretty much locked up. Greg Biffle capitalized on this and was the second non-chaser to win, getting his 2nd win of the season at Homestead. The Hendrick hopefuls of Johnson and Gordon finished 2-3, but it was all for naught as Kurt Busch managed a top 5 finish. Tony Stewart split them in 4th position, Mark Martin in 11th, and the other championship hopeful Dale Earnhardt Jr. finished down in 23rd position. Kurt Busch ended up holding on and winning his first NEXTEL Cup championship by a mere 8 points over Jimmy Johnson, which was only 2 positions back then. Jeff Gordon was 3rd in points, 16 points back of Kurt Busch. Mark Martin ended up jumping Dale Earnhardt Jr. for 4th in points, while Tony Stewart, Ryan Newman, Matt Kenseth, Elliott Sadler, and Jeremy Mayfield all held their positions. This championship meant Roush Racing went back-to-back as they of course won the 2003 championship with Matt Kenseth. This was Kurt Busch's first and only NEXTEL Cup championship. Thanks so much for watching.